All right, good morning, everybody. We are live coming at you from the Rio Grande Valley International Poetry Festival. And so this is our 13th year, and because of the whole COVID virus situation, we are basically doing this remotely. Normally, on Sunday mornings, historically, with the festival, we go to the Panteon, we go to the burial site, or the grave site of Gloria Anzaldúa in Hargill, Texas. But because of the situation, we want to we could have, I guess, shown up with masks, all social distancing ourselves or whatever. But actually, we've got some awesome guests here, and we're all in pretty much different parts of the. Some of us are in different parts of the country. So we want to welcome you all once again to it's Sunday morning of the Rio Grande Valley International Poetry Festival, the IPF, and we have some amazing guests joining us here today. And tell us a little bit. Tell us your name and where you're coming from today. Amalia, you want to start us off?
Sure. I'm Amalia Ortiz. Right now, I'm sitting in my living room in San Antonio, Texas, but I'm originally from the Valley, from La Feria. So, yeah, we'll get into it, but definitely Gloria impacted my work just because she was the first person I ever read who was writing about our region.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Lena, talk to us.
Hi, my name is Priscilla Celina Suarez. I'm here in McAllen, Texas, and Gloria was really an inspiration when it comes to being a poet and a writer. She taught me that I could write about myself, about how I am, without having to fit anybody else's narrative. And so she's been very important in our community, especially lately with the political scene in the Valley and just everything that's happening. She's been very alive here, and we keep rediscovering her, and I love seeing that. I love seeing how the community finds her, just different generations for different reasons, and she just keeps being brought back. And so I love that she feels like family to us, and she's one of the reasons that so many of us have bonded.
Yeah, true. That's awesome. Thank you, Lena, for joining us. And you're coming from what city, Lena?
From McAllen.
Cool. I don't know if you mentioned it. I know that, but in like 10 years for posterity and stuff. So,
Yeah.
Lauren, welcome. Talk to us.
Well, first I'll start with continuing what Lena said about people finding Gloria again, because that's literally how I came to her work. I think one of the usual stories where I didn't find out about her in the Valley. I had to move away to the East Coast and then to find her, and then really to feel like home, which I feel echoes a lot of Lena's sentiments, and just kind of coming to her work. And I've always appreciated that every time I reread, some of her pieces, Borderlands and Luz en el Oscuro, I always feel welcomed there. There's a lot of scholars and a lot of people that write kind of adjacent to what Gloria was doing around the same time period, but their work is so intractable. And so I've always really loved that, or she's always there for a plática, like pan dulce and café sort of thing.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. And I know that eventually Gloria was a diabetic, and that's something that affected, of course, her diet. And from what I've heard from her friends and family talk about it, like she was very meticulous about taking care of her body and that sort of thing there. And but I've also heard that from her family that even though she was essentially a vegetarian back home, when she came back in San Francisco, but when she came back to her mama's house, I don't know, Lena, if you have some details, she had the pan dulce and cafecito she had to have that.
Es que no se puede. It's rude to, it's rude in our culture to say that, porque van a pensar that, like you think that the food that they prepared is gross, or that te estás haciendo muy. So it's really impossible in our culture to do
But when
that.
she came back to her mama's house, I don't know, Lena, if you have some details. You know, she had the pan dulce and cafecito every. You know, she had to
Sorry,
have that. There's a little bit of a reverb, so.
It's rude to, it's rude in our culture to say that porque van a pensar that, you know, you're there. See, so, you know, it's just, it's culture. And then over in Hargill, it's a very close-knit community, and everybody knows each other. So, you know, that's the valley for you. That's the valley for you. So, yeah, the tamales, the cafecito con pan. Yeah, and then what I love is these are some of the details. If you go to UT Austin into the special collections, you'll find all that personal information from her notes, from her letters that she would write to her sister. It's just really cool, the collection that you find there. You know, there's from her professional life, there's from her writings, just how meticulous she was in her writing. And I think, Lauren, you've gone there and you've experienced that too, how a lot of her notes are actually drawings and little figures that you can't really understand, but she understands what she was, you know, the notes that she was giving to herself. But just going into the archives and finding letters that she wrote to her sister talking about Celina and Celina's passing. And back then our social media was the radio. Que pasa 99.5. I don't know if you guys remember that station, but you know, all the rumors that were going around about her death, and you know, so it was really cool to get to experience the South Texas Valley girl that lived inside Gloria, you know, all those chismes that just brought back a bunch of memories to me. So I would really recommend, if you want to get to know Gloria's essence, going into those archives. It's overwhelming because there are so many files, so many items archived, but it's just really cool to see how her mind worked and her personality that a lot of people didn't get to experience.
Yeah, and you know, I love that. Thanks for sharing that. Just that sentiment that Lauren, that you mentioned about, you know, feeling at home in her work, and she's like that tia that's not really your tia, but you call her tia forever, you know, or whatever. So, oops, I'm sorry. There's a little bit of background noise from my end. Sorry about that. I don't know if. But let me bring Lauren back here. So, Lauren, we were talking about, you know, like your sentiment of feeling welcome in her work, in her writing. Sorry, there's some audio that sounds like nibbling or something. I don't know.
There's a little bit of popping. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where that's coming from.
Let's see. I guess I'm gonna turn off. I guess if you could check, if you could mute your mic until it's time to talk for now, just to see. All right. Come back, Lena. Come back on the mic. Let's see. Yeah, it sounds like you're typing, Lena. I don't know if that's on your. I don't know what the popping sounds like. An alien. Somebody's. Sorry. Not sure how to fix that part. We're gonna have to just pull through here. But Amalia, go if you could. I guess we can go back to the beginning, guys. And I just wanted to give people a chance to come in and say hello before we kind of sort of started a little more officially. But I want to welcome you all once again to the Rio Grande Valley International Poetry Festival. It's our 13th year, and we're paying homage to Gloria Anzaldúa, who is, you know, right here from the Rio Grande Valley. I know Wikipedia says, if you don't really look for it, you don't really research it, it just says Harlingen. She was born in Harlingen, which is not the case. So she was born in a hospital in Raymondville that does not exist anymore, and then she moved to a ranch in Hargill. So that's part of the issue. But I'm going to have Amalia's going to share a little bit of her biography, please.
So this is off of the Poetry Foundation website. Gloria E. Anzaldúa, born 1942, passed away in 2004. Gloria E. Anzaldúa was a queer Chicana poet, writer, and feminist theorist. Her poems and essays explore the anger and isolation of occupying the margins of culture and collective identity. Anzaldúa has been awarded the Lambda Lesbian Small Book Press Award, a Sappho Award of Distinction, and an NEA Fiction Award, among others. She is the author of several books of poetry, nonfiction, and children's fiction. Her book, Borderlands, La Frontera, The New Mestiza, 1987, and her essay, La Prieta, are considered to be groundbreaking works in cultural, feminist, and queer theories. With Cherie Moraga, Anzaldúa co-edited the landmark anthology, This Bridge Called My Back, Writings by Radical Women of Color, and that was 1981. So just a little bit of what she did.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And I know that one of the grants that she was awarded was the NEA you mentioned there, the National Endowment for the Arts, and that's just so important for our society, especially look at how we're doing now with this whole COVID situation, how much we're running to the arts, Netflix and music and, you know, YouTube and painting and crafts, all the craft aisles at Walmart and Hobby Lobby, like all those aisles are pretty empty because people are turning to, you know, to the arts in a big way. And so I'm glad that Gloria was among folks that have been awarded the National Endowment for the Arts. And that's like so important. That was such an important part of her career because, you know, academics need financial support, especially when we're not making things at a factory selling that. We're producing artwork and theories and stuff. So thank you so much for sharing that. So I want to kind of, I guess, ask how are you dealing with the whole COVID situation? Like, what are you up to career-wise, and how are you dealing with that?
I guess I could start. I'm the director of theater for an organization called SAYC, San Antonio Youth Yes. And so when things are not on lockdown, I teach theater classes. It's an after-school program. And then on weekends, I have middle school students. So I know that the public school is continuing as best it can virtually. But with my organization, I've been furloughed. I had not seen my students in 6 weeks. But we're beginning as an organization to think of what strategies can we kind of stitch together to try to begin to present programming online and virtually, because as you mentioned before, like the people are turning to the arts. The arts must go on. We live for work as human beings, but in addition to work, there has to be something else, some sort of room for the soul to rest, relax, celebrate, and that often happens through the arts. So I've been on furloughed, but I've been making masks, as many as I can to give away to family, friends, anyone who asks for them. Going stir crazy like everybody else, but also staying in contact with my students. We have virtual meeting places and virtual student meetings, and trying to just be available to students who are, some of the people suffering the worst in this time, to be locked down in your youth and to not be able to, just every day in our studios, I would see them, run in and hug each other, and so hungry for each other's company, to now, only have that virtually, must be, really difficult for them. And
tell us a little bit more about where you work normally. What activities do you work with the kids on?
So the SAYC, San Antonio Youth Yes, they have their after school arts program. They have 4 studios. They have visual arts, which is what you traditionally think of, painting, sculpting. So then we also have media arts, and that studio focuses on filmmaking and photography. Then they have Hive. It's a home for innovation. It's new media. So they do video games, coding, zines, also graphic novels. So, the margins of new media. And then they have ALAS, the ALAS theater program, activating leadership through arts and service. And that's my studio. And so it's a theater program, but it's different than high school from most high school theater programs, in that my students write their own plays. So I'm a poet and a playwright. My first training academically, my bachelor's was in theater. And to me, what's most exciting for these students is teaching them to be playwrights. So by the time they've graduated high school, they're going to go into mainstream American theater and they're going to experience things that I experienced, like being told you're too brown or too short or too this or too that. And they can wait until they're cast, or they can have the tools to be able to write their own plays to cast themselves as whatever they imagine themselves to be. And so it's exciting that we begin that with middle school. The middle school students are like, how do you tell a story? And then we putting middle school stories on stage that they write and they perform. By the time they're in high school, every senior has to do a capstone project, and they are writing and producing their own theater. And it's been awesome to see our alumni go on to do, like in the style of the Carperos. I have some students at Texas State University that weren't being cast, and they're like, well, we're going to do theater in our backyard. I'm like, that's awesome. That's exactly what I wanted to prepare them for when they go off into a world that's going to judge them for what the world sees them as. And they're like, well, we have the tools to show the world what we truly are. And so that's what we're trying to do, create storytellers, enable them to tell their own stories.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Amalia. And these kids, like you mentioned, they come in and they're seeking that. They're already culturally sensitive. They're already, wanting to be around art, and then they're maybe in a way a little more sensitive, and they want those hugs and stuff like that. Maybe, I don't know. Myself as a poet, I don't know. Part of being a poet, I think, or an artistic person is, maybe being more sensitive to other people's needs and being empathetic and stuff. And that's why we're all very huggy. So let me bring Lauren here and see what's going on. So Lauren, what are you up to these days in New Mexico, right? And
Arizona.
Sorry. Oh my Lord.
No, you're good. They're next to each other.
I just got unfriended by all of my Arizona friends.
No, you're cool. You're cool.
Tell us the name of this university and what are you up to and how are you dealing with this whole COVID thing?
So I got my MFA at Arizona State University. I graduated in 2015, and I really liked Phoenix. I had gone to the East Coast some time ago and then can't really deal with the cold. So I ended up coming back here, and I've been a full-time instructor teaching English composition since 2016. And so I have my total, I guess from 2016 to now, I've been teaching online. So there wasn't a huge transition for me. I teach the 7.5-week sessions. So I was already working online. And I guess the main difference is I get to spend more time with my pets, which is nice. And then other than that, I'm working on a PhD in justice studies. And I'm looking at, future, like Latinx poetics of the future, which kind of makes the claim for the idea that if you do not have a past, you cannot imagine a future, which is an extension of, I think, Barbara Gordon's, I forget whom, I'm probably wrong, idea.
The PhD, I'm trying to get the technical. So what sort of department or college is that under?
So I'm in the School of Social Transformation. And so the PhD in Justice Studies is really broad. So it's, the idea behind it is that justice is not absolute. And there's no way that it could be. So doing the sort of work that I do, making claims about the importance of poetry and poetics, particularly by Latinx folks, is a move towards enacting a justice or rectifying an injustice in a very broad sense.
Wow, that's amazing. So the School of Social, not change, but what's the word?
Transformation.
Transformation, which we're like in the middle of virus-based social transformation, and yet this is real, and we're not sure how much we may not be going back to where we were at all. So I'm so glad you're just in the middle of that, and there's so much to delve into, I guess. But thanks so much for sharing. Let me bring Lena here. Hi, Lena. Your mic's still mute right now. There you go. So yeah. So what do you? Oh yeah, we're getting those crunchies popping.
Yeah.
This is your phone. Yeah. Is that your phone or your laptop? Okay. So, yeah, tell us what you're up to and how you're handling this virus.
So I started working from home. I work at McAllen Public Library, and one of the things that we've had to adjust to is going virtual with our programming and just how we offer the services and how we interact with our community. And so we've also started offering curbside delivery, which has been getting used like crazy. We did not anticipate the demand for it, but yeah, it's been getting used for like crazy. And just adjusting to the virtual programming, it's learning a whole new set of skills for a lot of people. So it has been keeping us busy, and we've just seen how important it is. And now approaching the idea of when we do reopen, it's obviously something we're going to have to keep, the virtual programming. So just it feels, I don't go often to the library anymore. I'll go in there to just, I need to go pick up something, but it just it's not the same without the community, without our patrons in there. And it's they're our family and our coworkers. Where it's just socializing is very big. I realized in my job, socializing with my coworkers. So it's just been an interesting experience. And writing, I wish I could say that I were writing more. I don't know. I have been reading more, but not writing. I just feel I have no energy, even though I'm just at home. I just don't have the energy right now. Oh, thank you.
Some of us run, thank you. Some of us run on this energy drink called Chisme at the water cooler. So without the
Yeah, that's very important. So I have a writing circle at the library, and we've changed our structure this past year. Before we used to have workshops and just have a few assignments, and so this year we restructured it. I received some feedback from our members, and what they wanted was a space where they could come in and just talk about their work. Cheese my time is the way I would refer to it, and it's really awesome just to be able to meet with them. I really, really look forward to those meetings. It's once a month, and it doesn't feel like work because we've become friends, and so just getting to hear their perspectives and the works that they're producing. Some of them are bloggers, some of them poets, some of them write in English, some of them in Spanish. We have a travel writer. It's just very interesting to see, all these different genres of writing and how we just want the same thing. We just want someone who will listen to us and will understand, because we think differently. We ask too many preguntas that there's really no reason for, but we understand each other, and just giving that space has been amazing for me. And I leave those meetings really inspired and looking forward to all these ideas that they help me come up with. So I miss the community in there, and just the way that it's just a really big social hub in our community here. So we're just trying to, we can't foresee the future, but we're still going and planning as if our upcoming festivals and upcoming programs are going to happen. That's the only thing we could do right now.
Yeah, you have to stay positive and look to the future. So let me bring everybody back, and if you could mute your mic, Lena, and let me bring everybody back. All right, cool. So I want to thank you all again for joining us out there. Whoever's watching us now or in the future, hello future. But if you're there now, definitely come up with your questions. Hit us with questions and like buttons and comments and that sort of thing. There is a link for y'all to join us here on camera if you like to maybe ask a question and that sort of thing. So I want to just kind of go ahead and go back a little bit to, how did you hear about Gloria Anzaldúa and how has she sort of influenced your work? I know for myself, I was almost out of college, like some of y'all as well. I mean, we didn't hear about Gloria Anzaldúa in high school, or certainly not middle school or elementary here in the Valley, especially back in the day. And so I know that she's on one of, How to Tame a Wild Tongue now is part of the AP language exam for high school students. So they get exposed to that, and I'm not saying it's there every year. I'm just saying, it's been part of that test. I mean, so there's exposure there, and national, really international, because there's students that take AP language courses all over the world. I mean, I was literally my last class, and it was like an elective, Rob Johnson's South Texas Writers class. That's where I heard about Gloria, guys. I've never heard of her before. I mean, not even in passing, not even like as a mention. Like, I mean, I had no clue, and it was just right in time. And it was an elective I didn't even need. I just needed another class. And I'm glad it was, it was that one. And so since then, I mean, I'm just very, very much influenced by her work. And I'll talk a little bit about her code switching, that sort of thing. But Lauren, do you want to, I know you mentioned a little bit, you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
So I'm not sure about that is what, but I was struck by this being included on a standardized test. And I wonder how Gloria would feel about that. I mean, it just seems so antithetical to a lot of her positionality. So I think that's an interesting way to look at kind of where you're oriented to and what that orientation does as it goes out into the world. But going back to how I was introduced to Gloria, I did not meet her, well, not in person, but I did not meet her book until I was on the East Coast. And so I was just impressed with everything. I hadn't ever really read a story or read anything that resonated with the experiences that I was having with the knowledge that I had, and then validated that knowledge as valuable. So that really changed a lot of my academic trajectory. So I came back to the Valley, and I was just putzing around my undergrad, and kind of once I found poems, and once I found how to kind of come inside a poem and then get myself out of it, that's more when I look to Gloria for a lot of the contemplative moments that I tend to have in my poems. So yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
So I'm gonna just jump in. I was somewhat fortunate to be introduced to Gloria Anzaldúa in 1989, and that was like 2 years after La Frontera was released. And so growing up in La Feria, I remember as a teen specifically, I just hated my existence. And part of it was that, I was suffering from like these, social problems that I didn't realize, having really only lived in La Feria. Like, I was raised by my grandmother, and she didn't have a car. So if we wanted to, like, people talk about the Valley. No, I was like La Feria, like really just kind of feeling caged in this one town. If I wanted to, it was a big deal taking a bus, the Greyhound, the VTC to Harlingen. And family in, throughout the Valley, sometimes they'd come visit us, or we would pay like a neighbor to drive us to go visit family on Sundays, various family, other towns in the Valley. And so, as a teen, I don't know, I wanted to be somewhere happening. And I think I falsely blamed the Valley for a lot of my issues, that I was bored, I was poor, and didn't understand that a lot of the cause of my grief was just like institutional racism and the economic, racism that's, comes with generations of, people subjugated. I didn't, none of that. I just thought the Valley sucks. And so then my brother, he was just this anomaly, just very bright from a young age, just genius, and got a full scholarship to Loyola University Chicago in he graduated in 1988, so it was early 1988 around that time. It goes to Chicago and is just learning like a sponge. And as soon as he finishes a book, he's mailing it to me and calling and saying, you have to read this, you have to read that. The education, and he was super smart, and we were good students. He was like, the education we're getting in the Valley is not what it needs to be, right? And I remember one time over the phone, he's like, I sent you this book. It's awesome. You're going to love it. He's like, and I remember him excitedly saying, it's this woman, Gloria Anzaldúa, and she's from here, the Valley. That was super important. She's one of us, and she's smart. And when I reflect on that moment, it always gets me emotional, because before that, it felt like the ideas of here and smart were never, put into the same sentence, the same world to me, because, our education was so lacking. And that's, one of the issues is if you grow up disempowered and brown and you look at the academic world and you don't see yourself reflected, then you think to be smart is to be an other. And if I want to be smart, I have to fit into this very white, sterile academic world. And so that's why it's so important. Her words are so important, because she was like so natural and so much herself, and representing a disempowered community, that if you read her and you come from, this is why she went international. You come from a disempowered community, anywhere you read her and you're like, wow, I have permission to be myself in my own language, my own skin, my color, my community. I can represent that and be smart, instead of aspiring to this academic, tower. And so it really, blew my world open. And so that's just, the beginning. I reread Borderlands every couple of years, and I always see something new. Later when you get into when I got into academia, when I was working on my master's, there were other things that, I didn't see. Just her use of the mixing of the arts and academia, going from, every chapter is like, there's little bits of poetry in there. And then there's she's making an academic point, but then there's like her personal stories, that all of that doesn't have to be separate. Like, there's my personal homespun stories over here, and my poetry over here, and then my academic thought over here. It's this whole person is represented, and that you don't, I think, students can feel that at home, definitely in the Valley, at home, I could be one person talking to my parents, my grandparents in one tongue. And then when I go to school, definitely in the Valley, for years, you couldn't be your whole self. You can't speak both languages. You can't use your slang, because that's this separate person that you have to be when you go to school. And she just like integrated it all to say that, these are all my knowledges. They're all necessary for me to be this whole person. And then I could go off.
Yes. So I wanted to, so Orquidea Morales is like here, but not. So she's kind of texting me on the fly because she can't comment on the Facebooks. But she wanted to kind of add to what Amalia was saying, how people come back to the Valley. So she was wondering if that's why so many people want to come back to the Valley after leaving, realizing the level of institutional racism there and how many changes we have to make. And for me, that's so interesting, because I think in other communities, particularly in other communities of color, there's just like this escape, the narrative of escaping and escapism. And the idea, I think that Amalia, correct me if I'm wrong, that you said that the Valley was the cause, or the Valley was why you were mournful or mourning, and what instigated the grief that you experienced, if I remember correctly. So, I think now, I wonder what tools we have now to be able to come back when so many people before haven't really, and also the impetus for coming back. Why do we want to come back? What do we want to change? How can we work against the institutional racism that is still so prevalent in the Valley?
Why do we come back? There's a responsibility. And I mean, you could say, you could paint yourself as, I don't know, a martyr or someone who's looking, I mean, a superhero, but in my mind, it's looking back, like, honestly, in a selfish way, the person I was, like, why was I so self-hating? It didn't have to be that way. And so a lot of it is just self-healing, is I want to go back to that child who was taught, hate yourself because of your poverty, blame yourself, hate your language, hate your culture. And when I look back, now, having gone away, can so clearly see all of this beauty that, at least in my situation, there was a lot that I'm just thinking in the institutions and school and religion that we were taught to embrace. But there was so much more because of it's just the history of racism of the region to keep, these farm workers disempowered pretty much for, economic reasons, that there was so much that we were taught to be ashamed of. And so with me, it's so healing every time I reclaim all these things that I was meant to be ashamed of. And so if it's healing for me, then of course, as writers, as teachers, as artists, it becomes a responsibility to share, just the shaking off of that mindset.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that something that for me, like, no, I left the Valley to the Navy. So I mean, I'm here in the Valley, but I'm just saying I left the Valley to join the Navy, and that's when I realized like I have a Texas accent, and from being in Boy Scouts as a kid, and we would travel to like Dallas area, Houston, Louisiana, and as a scout, you're like, or having primos in Houston and all over the state, you realize you have this Valley accent, whatever that even means, right? Or whatever, right? So, but yeah, going back to some of these ideas about like that wholeness that Gloria, she carried herself as this whole, and she, as this complete person that wasn't going to separate her historias, her modos from home with the academia and so on. In other words, so she was comfortable in her own skin, being herself, and mixing. I know that recently the idea of code switching has come up. That has, and the conversation may have started a long time ago. I'm just saying it's come up recently with like Trayvon Martin case or similar cases, in the sense that African Americans have their own code switching that I was not aware of. In other words, it's like, hey, if you're going to be testifying on that stand or what have you, or if you don't want to have put on airs by talking like highfalutin over here with your family, all academic, so you could get in trouble for being too academic with your raza, you can, or you can, if you're testifying on stand in front of the whole nation or the world, there you are on CNN giving an interview. And so there's the code switching that, for example, that African Americans and cholos, in certain neighborhoods and that sort of thing, have to do the code switching for survival, for self-defense, because if you if you're talking like you talk on the street in the barrio, that justice that you seek may not come your way. So you have to code switch and put on your, mainstream standard American English or whatever, a different kind of code switching that is, something that just struck me as interesting. And so this idea that Gloria, carried herself as a whole person, and she doodled and had artwork, and she mixed poetry and mixed family stories, as well as the academic essays, all into one. It was really cool. And in one word, one of the most inspiring or influential, I guess, things as a writer that I picked up from Gloria, it's mestizaje, that mixing. So, but I'll let Lena or someone else jump in here. Sorry.
No, yeah, you're completely right with that. I think for me, when I first experienced Gloria was 18. I had left the Valley. I had gone to Michigan, and I had signed up for a biblical studies and Greek mythology course, and that's where I first discovered her. And I was very naive. I left not realizing how different our little community was from other communities and throughout the nation, throughout the world. So it was definitely a culture shock for me. For me, one of the reasons wanting to come back home is because that experience of not being in the Valley made me realize how special it is here. And the only thing is coming back, of course, with a different mindset, not being a kid anymore. You start seeing all these things around you. Just the way our own raza can be with immigrants. You would like to think that everyone here in the Valley has an open heart, has empathy. And I just started seeing all these things that really confused me. And that's when I turned back to Gloria and started seeing her differently, because initially I was insulted by everything that she had to say about the Valley. But coming back, I just saw it differently as an adult. They started reading her work more. There's still times where I'm like, Gloria, ¿qué te pasa? What are you saying? But at the same time, she has a really her perspective is just it's not narrow-minded like a lot of us that have lived in the Valley all our life. We want to defend our culture, but at the same time, we can't be close-minded as to the realities of what our surroundings are, and that's been very, very. The essence of that has been very bright in the past few years, and that's why I feel like community has been to Gloria's work, and just seeing how they're discovering her without needing to go into the academic world. She's come to the community, and she has been brought back home, and that's just really, really wonderful for me to see, because 10 years ago that wasn't the case. We have Lauren and Amalia and you too, Daniel. You've experienced our little Gloria called, where we go and we read to Gloria. People look at us like we're crazy. We don't make sense, but it's just, she has become our madrina in so many ways. And even though we're not related to her by blood, we do have that kinship to her, because she helped us find our identity in so many ways. Well, I'm speaking for myself, but I know a lot of other people in the community feel the same way, that she's helped us rediscover our identity and own it, and not fear what other people are going to think, especially that fear of what people in our own community, our own families will think, for speaking our truth. And so she's given me a lot of courage to write about what's real.
I love that. Thank you. And I think we've all spoken, y'all have all spoken about just this, built-in shame of being, even just being from the Valley. You could be a millionaire, but you're from the Valley, so you're not as smart, you're not as talented, you're not as whatever. And yet, and we can go on and on about all the talented folks that have come out of the Valley. But I think that part of my shame, let's say, was, being a kid and working in La Labor, working in the fields, picking onions. I mean, we picked onions from Rio Grande City all the way to Mercedes, everywhere in between, sometimes on a Sunday morning, and we had food stamps, like the actual book of coupon food stamps, and, different color coded. I mean, so we had to go like pick onions on Sunday morning, and then on the way home, stop and buy like a 2 or 3 cent gum, a single gum, so we can get change, and then go back to the store, all dirty and smelly and muddy and smelling like onions. Go back and get one roll of toilet paper for 80 cents or whatever, because they wouldn't take food stamps for toilet paper, and I love my childhood. I am not saying I want my kids to experience that poverty or that or etc. But I'm saying I've embraced it, and I used to not talk about it. I used to be like, oh, hush, hush, we're migrants, or we work at La Labor, or oh gosh, you don't announce that you're on food stamps. I mean, for a teenager growing up and whatever, that kind of thing was tough. And so that's just, one side of it. But even just language, the shame that was built in, like you mentioned, Amalia, with the built-in racism, institutional racism, and so on, of like, oh, I speak another language. My skin color is a little different, and that sort of thing. So, thank you all so much for chiming in on that. I want to get into, let's see, a little bit of, I guess. Maybe if you have a piece of something that was influenced by Gloria, that'd be a good time to maybe start sharing a little bit. But before we do that, if y'all have any questions from the audience or whatever, we'll see if we can come up with that, or questions for each other or that sort of thing. Please go ahead and chime in.
I'm afraid to monitor the Facebook because that was me earlier that set off that crazy echo. Because I was trying to look at Facebook and this page at the same time, so I don't know if people are commenting or watching.
Yeah, there's our private chat back here, but then there's a comment at the very top. If you click comments, you can see whatever's happening on Facebook. So I meant to mention that earlier.
Hey.
So the Celeste de Luna piece of art, Amalia, behind you, if you can show it to us and talk a little bit about it there.
I love this. So this is the cover of my first book, Rant, Chant, Chisme. I was super lucky because authors aren't often given the choice, who do you want on your book, let alone your first book, right? But they asked any artist that you're interested in for the cover of your first book. And because Rant, Chant, Chisme, so there's a whole section that's magic. It's called Magic Valley Girl. It's just all of these poems inspired by the Valley. The experience of growing up on the border it's just the strongest influence in my life because it's hard to shake that. It's just really made me who I am. And so I knew that I wanted the cover to be by a Valley artist. And so before I even had any image in my mind, I contacted Celeste de Luna. We both went to high school together, La Ferias, Go Lions. I said, I need a piece of your work. If you haven't checked her out, she is, nationally recognized, probably internationally recognized. And I knew I wanted anything that she had. She said, well, I'm working on a piece right now. It's a self-portrait. A lot of people think it's me. It's not me. It's Celeste. And she said that it was in progress at the time, but there's I love the story. So it's the chicharra on the tongue that there is, I guess it's folklore or home medicine, that if you are suffering from susto, one of the remedies is to put the chicharra on your tongue. So if you ever heard the cicada, it makes a loud noise that just, it's inescapable, and it's also like a vibrating noise. So this is this beautiful idea that for those who don't know about susto, man, so much of what curanderos have done through the generations, it's natural healing, come from indigenous thought. And there's a wonderful book, I think it's The Woman Who Glows in the Dark, this RN who breaks down why it is that so a lot of the natural healing hurts, but natural healing works. And so the idea of susto has been around for generations. When you look at it, it's actually PTSD. Somebody experiences something, and in Native thought, it's soul loss, like your soul is shaken from your body. But it makes sense when you think about when you live through a trauma, you are not yourself anymore. And it's this long healing to get back to who you were, or reclaiming that part of your soul that you've lost. And so one of the remedies, if you lose your ability to speak, when you think about PTSD and losing your voice, it's kind of like losing a sense of yourself. Just a beautiful thought that you use the natural, the chicharra, which is so loud, to speak for you, to like teach your tongue how to be as loud. And so one part of that, it's ceremony. We're not saying that there's necessarily like magic, that the chicharra is going to magically do something, but it's the whole idea of your community, your family, even the natural world kind of rallying around you to reclaim your voice. And so, I started out spoken word poet. And when I think back to, the young self, the person I was in the Valley, was super shy and definitely afraid, even though I had so many stories to tell. And so it's like this conscious decision that I'm going to claim my voice. And so I just love that this is a conscious decision by a person suffering from susto to, I'm going to heal myself. I'm going to do this ceremony, whatever ceremony is to you, to find myself.
That's
but yeah,
awesome.
Check out Celeste de Luna.
Yeah, she's fantastic, and she has some amazing work. I know she recently moved to San Antonio with her family. Celeste de Luna did, and she's a print artist as well as all kinds of visual work, of course. And she's tremendous. So I probably knew this, but I guess so. I forgot that you all grew up together in La Feria, and so Lauren, Lena, feel free to shout out Mission Eagles. Feel free to shout out your high school there if you're so inclined. So Lauren, how much is Gloria included in your present work, research-wise, I mean?
Not too much generally, because I'm working on Latinx futurism. So first I have to define what that is. So that's real fun. I'm just making this stuff up right now. So I'm trying to put my big girl pants on and make a claim for an academic idea. So I'm working through that right now, but I think once I get into it a little bit further, there's a lot of the work that has been coming out more recently of hers. And I think a lot of the glyphos that she has could work for like a representation of some of the ideas, the written ideas that I'm having. So yeah, I appreciate the question. But so also Orquidea asked another question. So she wanted to ask if Anzaldúa helps us move beyond the romanticizing the difficulties people can face growing up in the Valley, and if it's done by showing the internalized racism.
One more time. I caught most of it, but just one more time, please.
Oh, sure. Do y'all think Anzaldúa helps us move beyond romanticizing the difficulties people can face growing up in the Valley by showing the internalized racism?
I'm not sure what she means about romanticizing. I mean, I can't say that this is, I don't know if it's necessarily Anzaldúa linked, but so I grew up in La Feria, lived there from the ages of 3 to 18, and felt like I was going to be bat out of hell. I'm never coming back. Left, and then I have family there, so I'm always going back to visit. But when I began to first write about the Valley, it was, I don't know if it's necessarily through a romantic lens, but definitely through a nostalgic lens. Like when I was growing up, there was a show like The Wonder Years, and it was like that. Looking back, a nostalgia. The Valley was this, and the Valley was that, and I was this, and I was that, and I didn't realize that was my lens. And so I moved back. So let's see. I graduated in 1990. La Feria, class of 1990. We're having a 30-year high school reunion coming up. So left in 1990 and would visit, but in I think it was 2012, I moved back and started UTRGV to work on my master's. And that's when it really hit me that it's like I had been writing through a nostalgic lens, and that the Valley still was and was still changing. And whatever my experience was, just because I felt like it was something I survived. It's like just because I survived the Valley didn't mean the Valley kept bubbling and brewing and becoming something. It's all, like Anzaldúa says, it's the open wound. But like if you have this consistently open wound, it's going to keep bubbling and brewing and transforming. And to return to the Valley and to see, hey, there's this wall there. It was not there before. And there are all these things that are happening that weren't happening in my nostalgic, in my rear view mirror. So I will say, like, I guess bringing it back to Anzaldúa, rereading her then in graduate school was definitely a different experience. I think she was really forward thinking in that she lays out, history of the Valley, but with an understanding that she was just a part of it, and that it's gonna keep going. And I think she had an understanding for that the future beyond her was going to be something different and always changing and morphing. And I don't know, I feel like it took going back to graduate school to be like, whoa, I don't ever want to approach my work, my writing in the Valley, with that nostalgic lens again, unless I'm being deliberate, like telling a story about my childhood. But to see that region, I guess, with like new eyes.
Yeah, there seems to, and from what I can tell, I mean, there seems to be like a lot of self-loathing because you're from the Valley. Not you, I mean, folks in general. There seems to be some of that. It's like, oh, I grew up in the Valley, and so and it's not just a Hispanic or a Latinx thing. It seems to be just a Valley thing, and so there's folks that hate the Valley. They just hate the Valley. Maybe it's because their dad beat the crap out of them as kids and they hate their childhood. And that's not a Valley thing. That's a human thing. That's a dad thing. Maybe their dad was a jerk to the mom, and that's a misogynist thing. That's not a Valley thing. And so there's a lot of early, experiences that have happened in the Valley, but we associate them with the Valley. And then we move away from the Valley and we say, oh, that was a Valley thing. And so there's some of that. And for myself, I mean, I know there's even people that have, let's just say, what we'll say, like, hey, kids, get in the car. We're going to go pick onions this one day, just so y'all can experience what my childhood was like. And that's awesome. I don't begrudge anyone doing anything like that, whether it's hunting, whether it's fishing, or whether it's, we're all going to get an injection in Mexico just so you can experience my childhood or whatever. It's my kids are having their own Valley experience and so on. And yeah, the Valley has evolved and changed in so many ways. We have Orquidea coming up here in a few minutes, and she's going to chime in with us. So I'm going to step out for a minute and bring her in. So welcome. I love the hair.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask Lena a question real quick related to Daniel's comment about kids in the Valley, because I know you're really close to your nieces, nephews, and if there's like a level of distancing or still a sense of responsibility to engage with them in that sort of way, like teach them how to be in the Valley or something of the sort.
Yeah, so for my niece and nephews, one of the things that how for them, there's growing up here in the Valley. For most of us that grew up here in the Valley, El Puente, the international, and that united us. So, the other side, the other frontera, Reynosa was always a sister, same way as your primos here in the Valley. Going to Reynosa was no big deal. Nieces and nephews, they've never gone to the other side. That's been a conscious decision in our family, because we've had experiences where relatives have gone missing, where just really ugly experiences, and it's been a conscious decision. But now for them, Mexico is a completely different country, and so the thing they want to know, they want to learn, and I guess as adults, because we put ourselves back into that time of when we were kids, we don't we make these assumptions that they don't want to learn, that they don't want to know, that they're not curious. They're very curious, which is something that is surprising to me, but they want to know, they want to have that connection to their culture and to their roots. And so for me, that's really cool to see how they do have this want to know, because they are disconnected, and at the same time, all the things that are happening around us, they want to understand. As young as they are, they're very curious. And so it's been very interesting how, just having them look at the genealogy. I love working on genealogy and just the family stories. They listen more than adults do sometimes. So it's just very interesting how they could connect what they learn at school. We need to just give them more credit, because we see them as kids, but they listen. And so it's just been interesting, and just as to how most of us have grown up.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you,
So
Lena.
it's just a very different.
I know, Orquidea, you came in to, welcome, by the way.
Thank you. I feel a little bit bad. I'm crashing y'all's party.
No, this is what it's about. Gloria would be happy. What would Gloria do, right? We need to make wristbands.
Bracelets, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I was talking about earlier, something that brought shame, if you will, to many of us, growing up in the valley, like, oh, head down, like, oh, we're migrants, like, oh, what are you doing this weekend? Like, when people I hated this question coming back from summer, right? First day of school, right? What's the assignment every teacher gave? Like, tell us write about your family vacation. I'm like, we went to Minnesota and with an asadón, or whatever. And now I realize, like, there were those times where, like, we went to Mexico, like to Jalisco for like 2 weeks or whatever. And that I see that as a vacation now. And there were no roller coasters or whatever. So, I wasn't aware at the time that I could write about, the most amazing, fried eggs or whatever, that my grandma would make or whatever. And so, and I'll shut up in a minute, Orquidea. Just real quick, I want to say, so like what brought shame, what was shameful with food stamps and that sort of thing, became a badge of honor even then, even as a kid somewhat, but certainly as an adult. And I've never had the attitude as a kid, or certainly not now, that it's like, oh, you're not barrio enough because you didn't go to the La Labor, or you're not barrio enough because you didn't have food stamps. Like, good Lord, there's some traumas that a white girl, I don't know, growing up in the valley had experienced. That, good Lord, I don't want to wear that badge. Like, you're valley enough, you're barrio enough, in your own way. But sorry, so Orquidea, welcome and chime in, please.
Thank you. No, and that's what I was thinking. Oh, should I introduce myself?
Please, yes. Thank you.
So thank you for having me. My name is Orquidea Morales. I'm from the Valley. I grew up in Reynosa, but grew up in La Jolla Mission. And I did my master's at UTRGV, now UTPA then. And then I went to Michigan for a few years. Now I'm in New York, center of Corona, unfortunately.
Michigan for a master's, or I don't know.
My PhD.
Okay.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about New York and the whole Corona thing before you jump into the.
It's been crazy. So this is my first year teaching. I'm working at a campus on Long Island, and a lot of my students, we had to move remote, and a lot of the students are having quite a bit of a hard time. Like, family members are sick, friends are sick, or they're working, and all these things are going on. So it's been a lot of transition, and a lot of, like, teaching has turned into counseling, which I don't think as teachers we're prepared for that always, mentally and emotionally. So that's been, a lot of this.
Yeah, hand holding, and they really need that social interaction, like Amalia was mentioning about her students. So so you have a response to my comments about the experiences, and I don't necessarily want my kids to have to grow up that way, but but they've got their own issues growing up. But come on in with that.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking of, like, the recent book. I've forgotten the name, thankfully, but the one that was really controversial for obvious reasons. And that for me was that idea, like romanticizing the immigrant experience, romanticizing, right, these traumas that a lot of people do that don't have to face them. And that's the difference, right? Like, if you have had to go through that, we learn not to romanticize it. We learn to remember them and let them shape us. But, right, it's not excluding, right? And that's what these experiences do, especially I'm thinking in popular culture and literature and media, right? When these experiences are voiced in a way that's romantic, they start to say, well, this is the only way to be Latino. This is the only way to be authentic Latino, authentic immigrants. Like, no, all our experiences are different because we're all different. So if somebody didn't do XYZ, right? If somebody wasn't on food stamps, doesn't mean they're not Latino, doesn't mean they're not from the Valley. It's just different experiences. Because I remember that shape. Like, my aunt had the stamps, and we had the card, the Lone Star card. And it was just like, you kind of got used to it. I didn't realize other students didn't have free meals. Like, I assumed everybody got free meals because that's the way it was. So things like that, that shape how we see the world. But
yeah. Yeah, and I was never ashamed of the government, the free government cheese. I tell you what, I mean, we talked about it in school and that sort of thing. I mean, and we had Lady Mariposa's friend Veronica Sandoval, Kim Schneider, the pianist and the musician. Kim's dad owned a junkyard growing up, and it's like, oh, you're the daughter of the guy that owns a junkyard. It's like, white girl in the Valley growing up with, a different kind of situation where people are looking down on her, that sort of thing. So yeah, we all have our own experiences. And it's definitely a valid question about romanticizing, because it's like, it's like, oh, you're going to add a Hispanic character, a Latinx character into your story. And so, okay, well, he's going to be on food stamps. He's going to be poor. He's going to be, and it's like, no, why can't he be a kid that went to Harvard from the Valley, and maybe he worked at HEB, maybe he didn't, pick onions or whatever. So no, that's a valid question and point. So awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me.
Appreciate you.
I have a follow-up question to that, to pose to everybody. If Anzaldúa and Anzaldúa's work shaped or reshaped how you view either yourself or the Valley specifically.
I guess I can go. I think for me, part of the difficulty was I was reading her work as someone that was born in Mexico, right? I read her work as something that's for second, third generation. Like that's her experience, and that's how she presents herself, which I found like really illuminating, because those are experiences that I hadn't had to think about. And I didn't see myself that way. So it did reshape how I saw the people around me and how I saw myself fitting in into those experiences, for sure.
Sorry, I could. Can you ask a question again? I was just distracted because here in San Antonio with the quarantine, we're doing the HEB pickup, and we have a pickup scheduled. And my husband was like trying to talk to me about that, and I was like, ugh. But he went to the HEB to do the curbside pickup. But what can you? I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
He went to the HEBs.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, also Lena's back. So
Hey.
The question was, do you all feel that Anzaldúa has shaped the way you see the Valley, or the way you see yourself functioning in the Valley, or as part of it? If there was a before reading her work and after reading her work, and then like a rereading her work, if there's still a change there.
I mean, I could jump into that. So definitely, like I told the story. It was like in 1989 when my brother first told me, excitedly, she's from here and she's smart, and they gave me the book and I start reading it. It's the first time that I had read anyone telling stories straight from the Valley. I feel like before that, I had, because I was a good student, I had equated being smart with the Romantic poets, Byron and Shelley. I had equated being smart with Shakespeare because those were the plays we were doing at school. I had, equated being smart with, the really messed up Texas history class that I took, just all of these things that were not a person living on a ranch in the Valle. And so then to begin to see her stories that were like, oh, I had that experience, to see her code switching, and this is in a book. So I can, if I want to be a writer, I don't have to sound like Keats. I can sound like the people around me, and the acknowledgement of there's wisdom in our culture. And so it definitely reshaped my view of myself, the people around me, my idea of what poetry was, all of that. It was the paradigm shifting to be influenced, to be introduced to her.
Thank you, Lauren, for your question. Is my sound okay? Thank you. It's weird, I can't hear myself. I don't like my recorded voice, so I don't like hearing myself, but I'm glad you can hear me. Lauren, you moved. Okay. So I don't know how much it's shaped the Valley per se. But I know for myself, I mean, just my way of thinking it, like similar to what Amalia said. I mean, it's like, oh, it's okay to code switch. Like Mexicans, and she talks about this, Mexicans will say, you're not Mexican enough, you alluded to Orquidea earlier. It's like, oh, you're not barrio enough, or you're not, don't have the experiences. And so like all of Mexico is telling Mexican Americans, like, you're not Mexican enough. Your enchiladas are wrong. Your tortillas are wrong, and your tacos are wrong, and so on. And then we have the Americans telling us you're not American enough, and so on. And it's like we're literally here in the Rio Grande on the border, visiting tias in Reynosa, in Jalisco, family, and coming back and forth to Progreso or whatever. But one of the, as a writer for sure, like something that's, it's like she gave us she empowered us to go ahead and code switch in a publication, like Amalia mentioned, like in a juried way, in a journal, somebody selected, this for you to be published. So the pochismo word is thrown around, and some use that as a badge of honor also, like, oh yes, I'm a pocho, which is fine. And some, I point out that it's easy to throw out the word pochismo, like, oh, you're a pocho, you're not speaking Mexican Spanish in a Mexican Spanish way enough. And it's like, well, what do you call internet? I mean, the internet, I mean, that's a Greek, those are two Greek roots. I mean, so we're speaking Greek now, the Japanese word for ice cream is ice cream, because it's not an ancient word, it's something new. And so you're code switching. So we're all code switchers, really. What makes a taco a taco? I mean, what makes a taco a taco? You have your Mexican, Aztec, corn. Okay. Oh, if it's flour, boom, that's new. That's old world already. So that's a mestizaje. That's already pochismo. Oh, using flour tortillas. And then you have these people like, oh my God, like, you're not Mexican enough. Like, you use flour tortillas. Like, hello, northern Mexico is a different ranch type life, and you're gonna have, it's too dry for corn or whatever. You're gonna have flour brought in. So flour tortillas are just as Mexican. Get over yourself. So what makes a taco a taco? You have your corn tortilla. You have your, unless you're using turkey, which existed in the old world, or something else, you have your beef, you have your chicken. That's all old world. So you're bringing, it's a mestizaje, it's a pochismo already. The most Mexican food ever, a taco, is already a pochismo, because you have beef from Europe or Africa, you have chickens from the old world, lamb, and so on. You add lettuce, that's not from the new world. Tomato is from the new world, So, I mean, it's like, get over yourself. Like, we're all pochos. And something that, to answer Lauren's question, I mean, that has influenced me a lot is also, just like I said, the mestizaje, just the mixing of arts and poetry, and mixing of languages and mixing of ideas, all here together, not separating them. So thank you for your question. We lost Lena for a moment, so I don't know if Orquidea, do you have a response to Lauren's question?
Myself.
Okay.
Yeah. Rookie mistake. It's like right there in the middle. Your mic is off and I still forgot to click it. I think so. My work, I use Anzaldúa's work quite a bit, and I think what she has done, I think, has helped me rethink how we read genres quite a bit, because of that mixing that you're talking about, right? Like the mixing of poetry, songs, theory, essays, all in one piece. The artwork of the cover, like if you read all of that together, there's so many different genres going on. And that's why I feel like at every reading, there's something new, because you're reading it with new eyes. You're identifying these different genres. So when I was doing my research, I saw it, because I'm a fan, I saw it through the eyes of horror. So I was trying to identify these horror elements and trying to think of Anzaldúa as a horror scholar, and what happens when we think about the horrific elements in her story, and how most of them are based on real experiences rather than fictional horror, right? And how that reshapes our understanding of the Valley, reshapes our understanding of race and gender. And so that greatly influenced like my theoretical work, and also like my approach to teaching, and my approach to like how I present myself, right? So I'm always talking about genres now, like these are different genres, these are different mixings that come together, and it depends on how we position ourselves as audiences, whether we can understand them or not, and how we relate to them.
Lauren, do you have an answer to your question? Excellent question, by the way.
No, I mean, I just have a comment on what Orquidea just said, because I'm thinking of the poem. It's close to the end of Borderlands, where it's the deer, and she has to kill the deer. And so I just thought about that as a realism, not in terms of another genre, like even like horror, for example, because it's just there. It's so hard to separate out that sort of lived experience and apply a genred lens to it, particularly because I've had similar experiences, and it's just what you do. So I've never thought of it as like a trauma or as something that needed to be unpacked or recovered from. So, yeah.
Thank you so much again for that lovely question. We're going to start to wrap it up, y'all, pretty soon, just because of time-wise. This is awesome. It's felt like we've been here 20 minutes at the most, but want to thank the audience. We're going to wrap it up in a little bit, but I do want to give an opportunity if anyone wants to share a piece of work that you've written. You're welcome to jump in on that. That would be awesome to hear a piece if you have something prepared. And then we'll start saying our goodbyes. Amalia, you have something ready?
Sure. So, real quick plug, because as artists, we're in desperate times. I would be trying to tour this book, but my latest book, I don't know if you see my t-shirt, La Canción Cannibal Cabaret. The title comes from Anzaldúa. She has a poem called The Cannibal's Canción, and the whole book is rewritten or poems after song parodies, but taking someone else's work and kind of deranging it into it's Chicana futurism. It's a post-apocalyptic musical. So I'm not going to read from this, but I went looking from grad school work when we had to respond to different readings, and this was a response to this is called Return to Homeland, and it was in response to the chapter in Borderlands. I know Homeland is in the title. I forget what chapter it is. But what changes this land has witnessed. I think of how the region has changed from Gloria's days, her grave on cracked and thirsty ground in Hargill, like the graves of her ancestors fenced and padlocked on this same cracked and thirsty ground. What changes this land has witnessed. She shared her knowledge of Tejas, of this region we called a valley, from those who crossed the Bering Straits, the indigenous and original inhabitants of pre-Columbian America, invasion built on top of invasion, yielding mezcal subjugation and conquest, a mestizo creation story. What changes this land has suffered. Spanish, Texan, then American flags unfurled, and the war, which was never a war, but occupation never ending, borders shifting like riverbeds, treaties erected, walls scaled, fences broken, constructs constructed, histories truncated, the fiction of white supremacy published as fact. What changes this land has suffered. The river's lifeblood, drawing people, now blood second to money, maquilas poisoning the well. There are two sides of the coin of progress that SpaceX and a medical school will bring, from conquistadores to Texas Rangers, now Minutemen. I'm going to add now children in cages. She spoke of coyotes, but what of cartels? She saw the coming of the new slavery, but never saw the migration spread from deeper and deeper south, from deeper and deeper dangers to deeper and deeper fears. Golfos versus Zetas, and newer chapters of this novella. She recognized it did not begin or end with her, but continues in a state of constant translation. What changes this land has witnessed, and now it is our turn to pick up the pen and aid in that translation. For Gloria.
Gloria Anzaldúa, presente. Thank you so much, Amalia. That's awesome. Let's see. I don't know if Lauren, do you have a piece to share?
Yeah, I do. So I guess I thought to read this piece based on, I think, a lot of what Daniel talked about. So my collection that I've been working on for almost forever is an obituary for my paternal grandparents. And so my paternal grandfather was a bracero, and so he tended to the orange fields, and also my dad helped out with that. So the way that I'm thinking of the book is, you know, the lines in the poems are the rose and the orange groves, and then the individual like images or the little kind of pearls that you can hang on to are the oranges themselves. So that's the concept of the book generally, but I've still been having trouble making sense of it sometimes. But this is a poem that came out in Scalawag that was part of their Latinx edition. First, cotton. Every year there is a cash prize awarded to the landowner for the first bale of cotton harvested that year. In 1954, the winner had 90 field hands working in near 100-degree Sunday heat in the race to win the prize. 1,521 pounds of seed and lint cotton ginned into a 454-pound bale. It took 3 men to load his robin egg blue drop-top convertible Cadillac. In 2014, the seed cotton submitted by the winners, weighing 1,580 pounds, was picked by hand. That is the only way to preserve the best of the crop. The teeth of the cotton picker pick everything, even bolls that are too young, ruining the harvest. As we drive cotton fields on either side of the road, I try discerning between an open boll ready for harvest and one too young. My father says, you know when the bolls are ready because your hand feel the prick of the burr protecting the soft of the leg. I look at his hands on the steering wheel. I do not ask him how he knows this.
Man, thank you so much. Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate you. Just real quick question. Sorry, did you say, was that your father or grandfather working in the citrus?
My grandfather worked in citrus, and then my dad, helped out with various stuff, I think similar to kind of what you were talking about.
Okay, cool. Thanks for clarifying that. I appreciate you. Yeah, so, and a lot of folks don't know that citrus, grapefruit, oranges, limes, there's thorns on some varieties. Most varieties have thorns, so it's not like picking apples or something like that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love the idea of making the book into like the spine of it, like the concept into like surcos and all the rows of the orchard and that sort of thing. This is a poem I wrote for Gloria, dedicated to Gloria. Let me just check the comments real quick in case there's a question for Lauren. But it was powerful, is what they're saying on Facebook. Thank you, Lauren. This is a poem I wrote for Gloria. It's called Sin Labels. Sin in Spanish, meaning without, but also sin, the Latin term, and so meaning without, but sin also meaning sin as in un pecado, so without or with a pecado, with a sin. All right, biblical sin. Sin labels or sin labials para Gloria Anzaldúa. We are not born with ideas about nationality, language, ethnicity, religion, gender, class. But somewhere along the way, the powerful tend to shovel that excrement on the powerless, making people walk around with a kind of heavy baggage our enslaved forebears carried. Lessons quickly learned: classify or be classified. Living or dead, we taxonomize or die. Here lies Gloria Evangelina Anzaldúa. Here lies Gloria Evangelina Anzaldúa. Nationality, Tejana Americana. Language, Tex-Mexican Americana or Spanglish in Califas in New York and Chicago. Ethnicity, Mexican American Chicana. Religion, Pre-Columbian American India, Católica con Zafos. Gender, mujer. Class, from pobre to blue-collar scholar. Classification, mestiza, Chicana, zurda, afligida, chingada. Sexual preference, woman on top y mujer on bottom. Temperament, anzalduende. Denaturalized, dark-skinned, demonized, dismissed, discarded, denuded, desolate. Described that todo lo negativo that can be thrown at a woman who is desechable, disposable. Deemed diferente, dissimilar, divergent, distinct, diverse, inderecha. But straight lines are an abstraction of mathematicians, those curved philosophers of logic. Toda línea tiene curva. All the earth is curved, circular, round. Even the horizon must bend to the laws of nature, not of man. Yet we burn, we yearn, we turn on each other, we categorize, we label, we sort, we stereotype, we pigeonhole, we think we have the right to don God's apron and rename what remains of the clay that he cools on his heavenly stools. But we are not born to be called. We are just born to be. Thank you. Appreciate you. So thank you all so much. This was awesome.
Wait, time out. Orquidea has a something.
Yes, awesome. Thank you. Please, yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
All right.
Lauren knows how to make this introvert work. So I'm going to read the poem that I think Anzaldúa's first published poem from 1977. It's titled Helpless. I shake him, I hit him with words, spit his insults back into his mouth. He swallows them, grinning. It's really good. Thank you for sharing, Lauren.
Thank you. Thank you all once again very much. I want to say a quick goodbye to Priscilla Celina Suarez. She's a former Macallan Poet Laureate, and she's part of the Gloria Anzaldúa Legacy Project, and so very much involved with the initial planning of El Retorno and that sort of thing. And she has a great website as part of the Macallan Public Library that is dedicated to Gloria Anzaldúa, and with some great links and history and that sort of thing. and so that she's curated. So thank you so much, Lena, for archiving, as well as, of course, being such an important part of the legacy in the familia. And certainly Lena's work is very much influenced, by Gloria Anzaldúa, of course. And so thank you all so much for coming out. I just want to give you a chance, Orquidea, to say a quick goodbye and shout out to your high school if you want, 956 or whatever.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I went to Med High. I was a giant nerd and still am. So go Med High, go Caduceus.
That's so, go Caduceus. That's like violent.
Thank you.
A ver, Amalia, you want to say goodbye?
Two last things I want to mention, because I feel like we've talked a lot. There's some things that we didn't even begin to touch, but I feel like, that's my cat, because we all are Valley people, we focused on her Valley connection. Anyone out there who hasn't read Anzaldúa, definitely reach out and read her, because she had a lot to say just about feminism and sexuality. And those are really also important topics that, man, we could go on for hours on that. One more thing I want to say, I want to give a shout out to Daniel for doing this. Man, mariachi. I've been watching, like, on Facebook this whole weekend, VIPF. You have made this happen with all of these streams that you've done and hosting. And if you've ever been to VIPF Live, it's exhausting because we're bouncing around from town to town. The Rio Grande Valley is not one city. It's the string of towns and cities, and it's exhausting. Like, you might have a reading at Padre Island and then somehow end up in McAllen. And so it's a lot of driving, but then a lot of community and poetry. And my experience has always been, it's not only physically but emotionally exhausting, just all the love that you experience. And so this past weekend, watching Daniel on Facebook, it's exhausting watching you hustle. But thank you so much, because without you actually hosting these discussions and readings, it wouldn't be happening. Check out your book. Check out Zeni Zotle. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but also your TED Talk is amazing about the power of mimicry. So much love to you.
Thank you, Maya.
Yeah. I just want to echo that sentiment in appreciation of Daniel, because, I mean, not only did VIPF stuff has happened, but I've worked with Daniel on a lot of Orquidea. When Orquidea and I were working on the Retorno, we also had a lot of archival things that we were producing at that time and recording. And so I want to kind of recognize that, Daniel, you're always willing to give time, which is like not everybody is. And I also want to, appreciate you all for engaging in the conversation with me. I learned a lot this last hour-ish. So I am really excited to go about my day today. So thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much. And when Gloria, passed away, I mean, there was a response from all over the world in her online obituaries and many pages that existed and whatever. One of the ones that struck me the most was these young ladies, and Amalia, I think, alluded to this earlier. Talking about marginalized people respond to her work, regardless of where they're from, and these young ladies from China, were posting about it. There's a scholar in China that reached out to me recently, regarding what she's working on her dissertation, PhD dissertation, based on the border, based on Chicanismo, based on Gloria Anzaldúa. And so much more to talk about, so much more to discuss. We just, this is a tiny fraction of what there is out there. And so thank you so much for keeping the conversation going. And that's what it's about. It's like, we weren't allowed, I say we as a society, we as a whole, decades ago, we as women, we as familia, we as raza, we weren't allowed to have this kind of conversation not too long ago in a public setting. So thank you so much, for everything. And much love to you guys. Appreciate you.